Hey everybody, welcome back to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and here on my YouTube channel. And today's video, we're going to continue on where we left off a few weeks ago on our little beginner series on how to EQ. A lot of you have written in a lot of emails and comment sections and such, but you want a little bit more help with EQ. You're just starting off on your mixing journey, and that's what I'm here to do for you today. So if you missed last time's video where we talked about EQing a kick drum for beginners, I'm going to leave the link in the description box below. Go check this out. We're going to work on the same song, and this time we're going to talk about a snare drum. So before we get started, like, share, subscribe. Make sure you go to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Get that free mixing course right at the top of the homepage. It's $100. It's my gift to you just for visiting homerecordingmadeeasy.com. And if you watch to the end of the video, I'm going to give you something else that's going to help you with your EQ issues, and I'm going to give you a big discount on one of my more popular courses for beginners called EQ Made Easy. Again, the link will be in the description box below. So here we are in Studio One. So last time we were talking about a kick drum. We're on the same session, rock instrumental. This is not a full mix. I just threw up the faders and kind of balanced it. Didn't do any EQ with the exception of the kick drum. Let's take a quick listen to what we are dealing with here. And then we'll jump into the snare and I'll show you some basic fundamentals of how to EQ a snare to get it to sound good and help you on your EQ journey. Here we go. Here's a little bit of rock music for you. Okay, so if you watched last week's video, you'll know that what should have you been doing while we were listening back to this. Remember we said in last week's video, and if you didn't watch last time's video around the kick drum, I'm going to tell you right now that whenever we are thinking about EQ, okay, or anything, any kind of processing on a track, EQ, compression, reverb, delay, whatever. A lot of times what a lot of beginners do is they just start throwing plugins on in their session. They went out and bought their new favorite latest bundle they saw on the internet, and they said, oh, I'm going to buy this bundle. We're going to start EQing stuff. And they never take the time to step back for a second and say, we need to listen and decide what we like and or don't like about a single element, in this case, the snare drum, before we start reaching for plugins. So tip number one is that before we even pull a plugin out, listen in the context of a mix, then maybe in the context of just the drums, which will solo up the drums here, so we can listen to the drums, and let's listen to the snare drum. What don't we like about the snare drum in the context with the rest of the drums? Do we like the sound of the snare drum? If we like it, we don't think there's anything to do to it, don't do anything. Move on to the hi-hats next. But is there something that you like or don't like about that snare? What would you want it to do differently? That's the first thing you got to determine. We want to process, in this case EQ, with a purpose. We want to be intentional. We just don't want to throw plugins on and start moving things around because we saw someone on YouTube do it, because that is going to make your mix sound worse, not better. So let's listen to these drums here by themselves. Listen to the snare drum and ask yourself, what would you do differently, or do you like the way it sounds? And then I'll tell you what I think. Here we go. Sounds pretty good, right? What did you have written down there? What do you think? Let me tell you what I think. I think it sounds great. There's nothing wrong with it. Actually, this particular snare, I believe, is a sample of a live recorded drum. But even samples can use some help, right? Doesn't matter if it was a sample, a non-sample, doesn't matter. What I hear in this example, what would I like to hear a little bit more to enhance the snare? First thing is I want a little bit more weight, a little bit more bottom, get a little bit more weight to that snare. This is a big rock track. I want the snare to be big and beefy, if possible. Number two, I hear a little bit, like we did on the kick drum last time, a little bit of this kind of nasally thing. kind of a cardboard, a woolly kind of a thing. Just a little. I want to try to carve some of that out. And then I want to hear a little bit more crack. I want the snare to really crack through the mix. Why? Because it's not a jazz track. It's a rock track with big guitars in it. We want the snare to cut through the mix, right? So that's what we want. So now that we've said that, we're going to solo up this snare. Now, as I said, as you get more tuned in and dial your ear in and get a little bit more experience, you always want to be doing this in the context of the other drums. Doing it in solo is good for demonstration purposes, but it's not the way you want to EQ things. I'm sure you've heard that before. Why? Because you can get a killer snare drum sound in solo, but if it doesn't meld with the rest of the drums or the rest of the mix, it doesn't matter. Nobody listens to the music in solo. They listen to it as a full mix, right? But for demonstration purposes, and if you're new, to help tune your ears, we're going to start in solo. So we're going to open up this snare drum, and here's just a stock EQ that comes with Studio One. You can use any EQ, but what I would recommend, whatever your EQ you use at first, is you want to have some kind of a graphic display so you can see the frequencies as an aid as you're getting to learn about EQing. So let me show you. So if I play this back, look at the display in the EQ. Okay, so there's many EQs on the market that do such a thing. If it's not in your DAW and your DAW doesn't have that display, most of them do, go check out FabFilter's Pro Q3. They'll have it, and there's others. But something with a guide here for when you're new. As you get your ears dialed in and you get more training, you don't even look at that. You're going to use your ears. And that's what we're going to do anyway, but I want to show you for demonstration purposes in solo. So what is the very first thing I said I wanted to do? Is I wanted to get some more bottom end. Now, typically on a snare drum, very first thing I would do is use a low cut filter. But if you notice in the very low end of this kick drum, there's not a whole lot of information, is there? Listen, watch and listen. Because this is a sample, listen. There's a little bit down here below 50, but most of it was already rolled off at recording. No problem. I'm still going to put a low cut filter on there. I'm going to go 24 dB of octaves, get a little bit more of a slope, and I'm usually going to be somewhere around 70 to 90 hertz. Or if there is a lot of low end information, I'm going to bring up this low cut to where it starts to sound a little thin, where the drum thins out, and then I'm going to back it off a little bit, kind of like this. Okay, even though there's not any information down there, it's good practice, because if you're doing a live recorded acoustic snare and it wasn't a sample, there would be a bunch of low-end information down there. You want to get rid of it. Whereas a general rule of thumb, 70 hertz to about 90 hertz or 80 hertz to 90 hertz, that's about typical for most snare drums, right? It all depends on the recording. This is why you got to use your ears. It depends on the size of the drum. It depends on how hard the drum was hit. It depends on the microphones that were used and a whole host of other things, but that's generally speaking. So we're going to do a low cut filter. Next thing I said I wanted to do, so I wanted to get a little bit more beef, a little bit more weight into the snare. That's going to reside somewhere between 150 and 250 hertz roughly. But what are we going to do? We're going to use our ears. So we're going to pick a point here. We're just going to drag it up. Okay, I'm going to narrow the cue just a little bit, and we're going to come up here and do the old sweeping trick. We're just going to sweep around until we hear that thickness of the snare that we like to hear, and then we're going to kind of dial in how much we want. Here we go. And because we're using the display, you can see where the energy of that snare is. Again, I want you to use your ears, but use this as an aid for my beginners out there. This is a beginner video, right? You can see where it is to help guide you, but I want you to also use your ears. Okay, about 204 is the center point on this particular snare. What did I say? Between 150 and 250, typically, that's where we are. Now that's a little much. We're going to dial it back a little bit. We're going to widen the cue just a little bit to give us a little bit more gentle curves. You have a little bit above the EQ point, a little bit above 2.4, 204, excuse me, and a little below it, right? So we got something like this. Okay. Now, we also talked about a little bit of that nasally honky effect that I want to try to get rid of. That's going to live somewhere between 400 and 500, typically. So again, what are we going to do? We're going to grab a point. This is at 500. We're going to drag it up. I'm going to narrow the Q a little bit, and we're going to sweep around to get rid of some of that offending frequency that we hear. .610 is the center frequency. So we're going to lower it. Till it sounds good. It's about 5 dB. How much should your booster cut? What do you think I'm going to tell you? Use your ears. There is no magic number. It depends on how it was recorded. Sometimes they're huge boosts and huge cuts. Sometimes they're not. If you have decent recorded tracks, or in this case a sample which is well recorded, not going to be big, huge swings, booster cutting. But sometimes you need that. Whatever the drum needs. There is no set it and forget it, okay? So there we go. Now, what else did I say we wanted to do? I wanted that a little bit more crack. It's rock track, big guitars, big kick drum, right? Bombastic drums. I want something that cuts. 5K is around where it's going to be. Between 3 and 5K is about where it's going to be on a snare drum. So let's grab a point here and let's go up there and let's fish around and let's find where it sounds its best. Eureka, 516, right? A little bit below, a little bit above. We have ourselves a little bit of crack. Okay, so now, here is where we started. I'll bypass it, then I'll bring it in and you'll hear it. And then what are we going to do? We're going to put it in the context of the drums and then ultimately the context of the mix and see if we need to fine tune it. Okay, here we go. Here's with none of these EQ moves. Here's what the snare sounded like. Okay, a little bit more bottom, little less woolliness in the middle, and a little bit more top end. Let's put it into the context of the drum set first. So here we go. Here's all the drums. Do we need to fine tune it? We'll fine tune it in the context of the drum set. Okay, so keep your eye on the bypass button up here, okay? When it's amber, it's bypassed. When it's not amber, it's engaged. It's enabled, okay? Okay, so you saw me there actually boost up a little bit more low end because I'm going to dial it back a little, and a little more top end because I felt like he needed it. Because we weren't doing it in solo anymore. We're dialing it in depending on what's going on around it. Now let's bring in the whole mix and let's see what happens. How do we like it? And we'll balance it. Here we go. Okay, so you notice I didn't take the fader on the snare drum and move it up or down to get it more or less. What did I do? I just readjusted a little bit of my EQ. Okay, I thought the top end was cutting through a little bit too much. I backed it back off. The low end is still probably a little bit too heavy, but I want to be able to make sure you hear this over YouTube and dial it in. When I take it away completely, we lose the snare drum completely. Listen to what happens when I take this away completely. Keep your eye on the power button. Big difference, right? So we already took a snare drum that sounded good on its own. It was a sample, sounded okay, it didn't sound bad at all. But in the context of this mix, in the context of this particular drum set, it needed to be enhanced. And that's what we did. This is a pretty typical EQ move for most snare drums. Again, you'll move the points one way or the other. The boost and the cuts may be a little bit more, a little less, but this is pretty standard stuff. So if you're brand new to EQ, follow this practice, and with just about every snare recording that you have, you're going to get something that's going to sound better, unless it's really horribly recorded. Or if you want to enhance it any further beyond this, and there's a lot of other things we can do to make this thing even sound more killer, but that's for the next video where we talk about intermediate and advanced techniques where we can do things to even make this sound better beyond EQ, compression, sample layering, saturation, etc. If you want to see that video, let me know in the comments below. If we get enough comments, I will go ahead and I will create that video for you. So that is our basic look at how we EQ a snare drum to not only sound good inside of a drum set, but also inside of an entire mix. I want to thank you so much for watching me today. Now, as I said at the beginning, don't leave yet. I want to give you something here. Go to Home Recording Made Easy, download the free course, blah, blah, blah. And in that free course, we talk a lot about EQ. As a matter of fact, most of the course, we only use the stock EQ and the stock compressor. So we get a little bit more in depth than what we have here in this video. So make sure you download that course. Beyond that, if you want to really get into EQ and you really want to learn it so you can really hone in on your mixing skills, you want to check out my course, EQ Made Easy. Again, links will be in the description box below. And I want to give you a 25% discount on that course. Use the coupon code YouTube25. That will take 25% off EQ Made Easy and any other course on my website. Go check that out. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. And until the next video where we look at some more beginning stage mixing tips and tricks and techniques, I've been Dave with HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com. Thank you so much for watching me, everybody. And I'll see you guys in the next video.